I'm Melissa Milhorn, and it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, retired U.S. Army. He wore the uniform for 4 decades, culminating his service as a commanding general of the United States Army Europe and the 7th Army. Many of you know him as a respected military analyst on MS Now and a contributor at The Bulwark and his new podcast, Command Post on The Bulwark. He's the author of If I Don't Return, A Father's Wartime Journal, and we will be having a book signing immediately following this out in the exhibitor area. General Hertling brings not just experience, but perspective on leadership, duty, and the enduring importance of principled service. Please join me in welcoming General Mark Hertling.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? I think you have lunch next, so I will try and be as brief as possible because they told me to do that. I have to just reinforce the kinds of folks you just saw. This is about the 3rd time I've done something for Principles First. It's a great organization. But the thing I've come to realize is that these volunteers that were represented up here are just unbelievable folks, both young and old and everything in between. So when you see them in the hallway wearing their right kinds of badges, give them a pat on the back and tell them how much you love them and appreciate what they do. Hey, as Melissa just said, my name is Hertling and I'm a soldier, or at least I was. I've spent some years in combat. Lots of years jumping around the country. My wife and I, after she had never moved in her life, joined up, married me, and we moved 29 times during our 40 years of service. But I've spent a third of our career in Europe. And I always knew during that service that we as a country weren't perfect. But we were steady and reliable and principled. I'll use that word from this conference. We were principled. And every day as a soldier, I know our teams tried to earn trust from both our citizens and our allies. I want to thank Melissa and Brittany and Heath and all the other folks from Principle First asking me to come to speak. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to discuss about 5 or 6 or even 7 things. They are some hard truths, what our allies think of us because of the 49 nations in Europe and the 54 countries on the continent of Africa that used to be part of my footprint when I was commander of U.S. Army Europe. I still maintain contact with quite a few, both retired and active service members as well as government officials. I'm going to talk a little bit about some words expressed by 2 Canadians, our friends from the North. I'm going to probably talk a little bit about a war movie, and then I'll also address our future. But before I do, let me just state and try and be blunt and provide some what we in the Army call BFOs. Always have an acronym when you're a general or in the Army, and the BFO stands for a blinding flash of the obvious. Our nation's institutions have been shaken. Our alliances have been strained, our credibility has been damaged, and our nation's values have been cast aside to the point that many of them can't name them or don't even recognize them. Now, having said that, let me get on with my presentation and talk about the first hard truth. While our military remains strong, and I believe that, we are, like all of you, living through a tectonic shift, what some would call a rupture. And that's in how we see the nation around us because we don't recognize it. The first Canadian I'll talk about is Prime Minister Mark Carney, because at Davos, he said something that I think should have stopped every American cold. Carney argued, and let me quote him here, that what the nations of the world are witnessing is a break in the rules-based international order. Not a turning of the wheel, but a fracture in the axle. It's a rupture, not a transition. For decades, we operated in this rules-based international order. At least I know I did, serving overseas quite a bit in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia and especially in Europe. And as I said before, we weren't perfect. The U.S. sometimes bent the rules, and others did too, by the way. But those rules in that international rules-based order provided some predictability. They reduced uncertainty. They allowed nations to cooperate, to invest, to plan for their future, and to ensure they were secure. The rules-based order, I think, rested on a few assumptions. The first one was that we would usually, not always, but usually exercise constraint in what we did as a nation. It depended on the fact that our institutions would outlast any one person, any one elected leader, that our leadership would usually be predictable, and that more often than not, that we would always try and do the right thing for the right reason at the right time. Now, those assumptions have all been shattered because now alliances have been reduced to transactions, democratic partners have been publicly disparaged, authoritarian regimes have been publicly praised, and military power has been described less as a shield for shared security and more to go what one person wanted it to do. And that's not the America I served when I was wearing the uniform. But here's that second blinding flash of the obvious. We own that. We all own that. We as a nation elected this individual twice. And that isn't an abstract, that's not an us versus them, it's just a fact. It's on us. So as a result of that, we're now experiencing what I would call a stress test. And I've studied stress in different situations, I've lived through stress, and what I realize is that stress changes behavior. And one of the behaviors it changes is the ability to trust. As a result, I think our citizens and our allies are no longer trusting us. They're not asking, when will America return to normal? They are now asking, can American institutions ever be trusted again? That question haunts me every day when I wake up. Now here's a fun fact about the Army. In my last job, when I left Europe in 2012 and retired, that year we as an Army conducted something called multinational exercises 437 different times during the year. Now, sometimes it was a one-on-one relationship with another nation's army. Sometimes there were 10 armies combined in a multinational exercise. Sometimes it was as many as 16 one time in Ukraine in 2012, as we were building a transformed Ukrainian army, as I was asked to do by their chief of the ground forces, General Hennadai Vorobyov. God rest his soul, he died of cancer a few years ago. In those exercises, it was great to see the capabilities and the attributes and the competencies of our soldiers improve. But, toward the end of my career, I saw them more as trust laboratories. Soldiers planned together, their leaders shared risk, and they built habits of cooperation. And what I really came to realize in my final years that this wasn't just about tactical proficiency or battlefield effectiveness, although it was. It was about building confidence in each other, because every nation participating in those events could rely on each other under the chaos of combat if they were asked to do it. But that confidence, in my view, has been changed, not because our soldiers or our military have changed, but because signals from our political leaders have changed things. Now let me get to the second harder truth, if I may. I don't believe we can simply promise to go back. I've heard that mantra repeatedly stated this morning as I've been listening into various conversations, that we need to find a way to get back. Because my experience from a leadership perspective is that trust doesn't just bounce back into place because we declare it so. And the resilience to recover from all that is really tough to get. We will, in my belief, and I offer this to you to think about, we've got to redesign who we aspire to be. And that's going to require a whole lot more than messaging or slogans or throwing out old executive orders or replacing officials who damage the institutions. It's going to require disciplined, humble work that absorbs the shock of what we've been through, assessing the damage that has caused, and then rebuilding, perhaps even in a different way, intentionally. I hate to use this analogy, but as much as many people talk about Hitler and what he did to Germany, what happened after World War II, I think, is much more enlightening. And it gives us a better example of what we will have to do. Because Germany didn't just regain trust with other nations of the world or the support even of their citizenry just by trying to go back to normal. I'm a big fan in Germany. I love the word Auftragtaktik. I love the word Gemütlichkeit. And I can cite a few more German terms for you if you like, but my favorite term is einmal Bier bitte. For those of you who speak German, that's just a simple request of the bartender. The Germans accepted that restoration of the old order would not be enough. That what they had to do would be generational, and it began over decades through consistent government and civilian conduct. In speaking with my German friends in the time I had over there, one Mayor Mueller of Wiesbaden, told me they realigned themselves with shared principles after World War II. He said his father was an SS soldier during World War II, and now he was the democratically elected mayor of Wiesbaden. They had to realign themselves with shared principles. So what I'm thinking is to rebuild and regain trust at home and abroad, we're going to have to do the same. We must, again, not just bounce back, but prove ourselves again to our fellow citizens and to the world, perhaps in new ways. And we must share with them that we will regain our exceptional approach, not because we are powerful, but because we're restrained. We're predictable. We're bound by the same rule of law that we ask other people to be bound by. And that we must name and follow our values. The dignity of mankind and womankind, the role of citizens in a society. You know, that work won't be accomplished just through one election cycle. I heard Bill Kristol and his panel this morning talking about how we bounce back in either 2027 or 2029 when new election. Yeah, I don't buy that. It's going to take much longer. And by the way, I love Bill Kristol. He's part of the Bulwark team. I work for them, so I better not disparage him on the stage up here. But I think it's going to take longer than that. And more importantly, it isn't going to take place on stages like this. I think it's going to belong to you. Because you as citizens shape policy. You write the narratives. You report the truth. You teach. You build coalitions. You do about your daily work with your family and your children. You hold power accountable. And you secure our freedoms and our civic responsibility. We can't just leave that up to the Congress of the United States because they failed us over the last couple of years. And I believe all that because I know when institutions are damaged and you have to rebuild culture, that individuals are the ones that steady them. And they do that by insisting on truth when it's inconvenient, by refusing to normalize what corrodes civic life, by modeling strong character, values, principles, by abiding by and trusting in the rule of law and our institutions, and truthfully, just by showing up. You all have shown up today. It's going to take a lot more of us to show up in the future. Because what we've also seen in the last couple of weeks and months is history has always moved in a positive direction by people who decided that the work was still worth doing. We've seen it in Minneapolis. We've seen it in other places. Okay, let me close with another sentence from a crude Canadian. And pardon my language here. After the Halifax Security Forum, Canadian newspaper journalist and analyst Mark Gurney wrote an article that was entitled, "The Americans Won't Be Fucking Back." And truthfully, I don't think that phrase or that headline was written to insult us. It was written, I think, to capture fear. Fear that the world is witnessing something they didn't expect because it's an aberration, and that it might be a potential preview of what might happen next. And I'm too much of an optimist to believe in what Gurney said. I believe we will be fucking back, and we'll be a whole lot better. But I also believe this: when we do come back, it won't be because we insist on it. It won't be because we demand trust. We'll only get trust back if we earn it. Now, I mentioned earning trust in my opening statement, and whenever I say earning trust, I hearken back to my favorite all-time war movie, and I'm an expert at war movies, for anybody that wants to quiz me later on. And it's the line from that great movie, Saving Private Ryan. Let me put the picture in your head. At the end of the film, Tom Hanks, playing Captain Miller, is dying and is sacrificing to save that one man, Private Ryan. And he pulls Matt Damon in close to him, who was playing Private Ryan, and he whispers two words: "Earn this. Earn this." The film then quickly cuts to a new scene with Ryan in the cemetery at Normandy, that beautiful cemetery on top of the beachfront, with a much older Mr. Ryan staring at a much older Private Ryan staring at Captain Miller's headstone, and his wife approaches. Remember that scene? And he turns to her and he says, "Tell me I've led a good life." Tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I'm a good man. That moment is terrific because it's not just living up to the demands of a dead soldier, it's about inheritance. We all, as a nation, have inherited a nation built by extraordinary individuals. Our history is replete with great people. Awesome politicians, civil rights leaders, reformers, teachers, immigrants, soldiers, and everyday courageous citizens who believed in principles over power. But now, if you take that metaphor a bit further, we're now, and the world is now standing at the potential grave of our credibility, and they're asking whether we understand the weight of what we've been given and what we need to do to get it back. and again, I'm going to repeat, the question shouldn't be, are we going to return to what we once had? The question is whether we will build something better with a new focus and a new vision. By rebuilding our institutions, by strengthening our guardrails, by defending the rule of law, by teaching civics, by achieving our national values and our personal values as well, by demanding leaders who see power as a responsibility, not as leverage, and by choosing restraint over rage and principles over transactions. We all got to start preparing for that. I teach MBA students, and I tell them as I teach them about leadership and strategy that an important part of leadership is building trust. And as my father once told me, trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. Well, we've lost a tanker truck full of trust over the last 1 year. And the only thing we can do to rebuild it is replace it drop by drop. And I believe we will. Not because we're entitled to it, not because the world needs us, although that could be true and important too, but because enough Americans still believe that principles matter more than power. That's why you're here. Yeah, the U.S. is going to be fucking back. But only if we earn it. And that work is why we're here today and why you go to the different Principle First conference all over the nation. And what I'd ask you to think about is find ways every day to make it matter and to earn some trust. Thanks for allowing me to speak with you today. Have a good rest of the conference.